Hello to whatever I call this show. I'm Santir, and today I want to talk about specifically why I like the Guild Wars 1 skill system, or build system you might say, and why I want to see the ideas transported into more games. So this is going to be live as opposed to like a pre-recorded audio over Guild Wars gameplay, because there's not really going to be gameplay, because I'm going to want to demonstrate stuff to you. So the first part of this is going to be describing how the system actually works. So there's a bunch of different pieces that I could talk about. Specifically things like how equipment works and all of that sort of stuff. But while there's some nice stuff here with like runes and things like that, what I really want to focus on is specifically the build system itself. So this is the skill screen. You might have seen it pop up in VOD of Consciousness, the previous show that I did, but I'm going to generally have been cutting it out of anything recent. And the first thing to look at here is we have our skill bar of 8 skill slots. We have our attribute lines of our 2 professions. So I'm a Dervish Elementalist, so you see my Dervish skills attribute lines here, and my Elementalist ones here. Okay, so this is going to be a lot to take in, so I'm going to go kind of quickly here. You see we have 200 unused points. These can be placed into an attribute line. Here's the cost to put it in. Here's how much you get back for going down. So if I go all the way to the max, which is 12, I've used 97 of my attribute points. This is important because I can do different attribute point spreads. So like 12, 10, 8 is a common one, or 11, 10, 10, things like that. You can also go like 12, 12, and 3, things like that. So this is kind of how your attributes work in terms of putting points into them. Now, you have 2 professions, as you can see here, like I said, Dervish Elementalist. All of these Dervish ones are blue because they're being buffed higher by runes. So you can kind of ignore that for now. This is due to equipment. And the secondary, so like if I go over here, or maybe over here, sure, he's not using a secondary. So you can see right now he has only 4 attributes. If I give him Dervish, he will gain 3 more attributes. But wait, I have 4 Dervish attributes. Why does he only get 3? The answer is because there's a primary attribute. For Dervishes, it's Mysticism. For Elementalists, it's Energy Storage. I don't have Energy Storage, whereas this Elementalist does. So the primary attribute is specific to your primary profession, and it usually has, well, they all have some sort of passive effect. So, for example, for Dervishes, it makes the cost of Dervishes enchantments cheaper. Dervish enchantments are an important part of how their profession works, or their class. And so it makes those cheaper to apply by 4% per rank. And in PvE, as opposed to PvP, there's some differences. But in PvE, you also get an armor per rank of mysticism while you're enchanted. So it gives you some additional durability. So like warriors, their primary attribute is strength, and it gives you 1% armor penetration on attack skills. Rangers have expertise. It makes a swath of skills cheaper. Monks have divine favor. It makes monk skills that you cast on allies heal them for an additional amount. Necromancers have soul reaping. You get the idea. Each profession has its own primary attribute that does some sort of passive effect. There's another benefit, though, and this is the part that's particularly interesting to me and what I like most about the system. It isn't specifically, like bonuses here, but what you get for putting points into attributes is you get improvements to skills. So, for example, I have this Scythe attack here, Chilling Victory, right? And right now, at my +3, it's doing +5 damage and some additional damage when I hit foes. If I move this up to 12, you'll notice it's now at +13 and 26 damage, and all the way up to 15 there for +15 and 30 cold damage. So, the way this works is the strength of your skills scales with your attributes. Now, one of the other key important things that you might have noticed, and I'll be getting to like these skills with the funky border in just a moment, but one of the key things you might have noticed is that I don't have enough attribute points to max out everything. Now, in this game, the way that it works is when you're in an outpost, non-combat zone, basically when you're out of combat, but in specific non-combat zones, because that's how it works in this game, you can change your build however you want. You can change your attributes, you can change your skills. When you're out in the field, you cannot change your attributes. You can change your equipment if you want to, and you can reorder your skills, but that's not really changing them. Okay, so for skills to have maximum effectiveness, you need to be able to put points into the attribute line. Now, what becomes interesting is that some skills work on different systems. So, for example, this one, I don't really need to put more points in to get the maximum benefit in terms of its duration, right? It already lasts 36 seconds, and its recharge is 30 seconds. The recharge being the 30 next to the sort of hurled arrow. And so more points in air magic is just going to make it last longer. Like if I go all the way up to 12, now it lasts 55 seconds, but it was already lasting long enough that I could keep it up permanently if I wanted to. Now, some skills are like that where they're just, they get a little bit of benefit. This one here, for example, though, this one has a 50% chance of failure if air magic is 4 or less. So I need at least 5 in air magic for this to be guaranteed to work. Gale here. Others, like this one, you might not need to put any attribute points in if you're not looking for damage, because you can see the green damage number, that scales, but you might just be running this skill for the touch target foe is knocked down. And that might be what's relevant to you. So you might not need any attribute points into here if you just want to use shock to knock somebody down. So different skills have different amounts that you want to use them. Another good example, actually, is in critical strikes right here, which is the assassin primary. You can see that it says you get some additional chance to make a critical hit, but whenever you make a critical hit, you gain 1 energy at 3 ranks and above, 2 energy at 8 ranks and above, and 3 energy at 13 ranks and above. So if all you care about is the energy you get for critical hits, you don't need to spec more than, one of those 3 tiers. So, and 13 is quite the investment. So it's pretty reasonable to only put 8 in, for example, and get the 2 energy. What all of this kind of means is that some stuff you can use pretty well with a lower amount of attribute points in it. So it's kind of like hitting breakpoints. So some skills are very breakpointy, where you really need to get, for maximum effect, you need to get certain thresholds. So certain thresholds have a big impact. Actually, a really good example of that is Life Siphon right here. So you can see currently this Necromancer has... I'm just going to throw it onto the bar. And drop out of Death Magic for the moment. So right now, at 3 spec into Blood Magic, this lasts for 14 seconds and gives -1 health degeneration to the foe it's on, and you get +1 health regeneration. If this goes up a little bit, you can now see that this is 2. So where's that breakpoint? Okay, it's at 4. So at 3 and less, it's only 1 health. But it's 2 at 4, which is a huge step up, right? And then if I continue at 12, it becomes 3, which is substantial. So you can see that that's the sort of thing where there's a breakpoint. There's a breakpoint at 4, and there's a breakpoint at 12. Or how much health degeneration and regeneration it causes. So you have some skills like that. So that means that, just want to put this character back where they had been. What this means is that certain things really are benefited by having certain amounts of points. And more than that doesn't really add much benefit. So you can kind of put at certain spots. So there's some versatility is kind of what I'm saying in terms of what effects you're getting and how much you're putting into any given attribute line. So there's a lot of versatility to this system. There's a lot of room to kind of try to optimize, or min-max, as you might say, to try to get the functionality and flexibility you're trying to get out of your build. Now, this is a team game, but I think that the system can work without it being in a team, and I don't think you have to have the specific 8 skills. So a few additional things. Skills are unlocked by doing things in the world. You can purchase them from skill trainers. There are skill quests. In something called hard mode, enemies can drop tomes that allow you to be able to unlock skills. So your skills are obtained through things that you do in the game, as opposed to as part of leveling up. So exploration rewards you with skills. Skills are a form of progress because the more skills you have, the more builds you can make. Now, there's another really important way of getting skills, which is to capture them. This character wouldn't have a signet of capture because he has all elite skills already unlocked, but a signet of capture is a skill that you can use when you defeat a boss enemy. You can use the signet of capture to get a copy of one of their skills. The signet of capture is replaced by it, and that's the only way to get elite skills, which are the skills with this sort of gold border around them. Now, what's special about elite skills is you can only have one elite skill on your skill bar at a time. This means that you have to be very intentional about what elite skill you bring. Now, you don't have to bring an elite skill, and sometimes there's no reason to. That's something that can happen. I have had builds that I have made where it's like, well, there's not really an elite skill that benefits this bar enough to bring because it wouldn't be a superior choice to one of the skills that are on there. But often you'll find that the elite skill serves some sort of really useful purpose. It will have unique functionality. For example, Ride the Lightning... excuse me. Ride the Lightning allows you to do a certain sort of teleport to enemy type thing. And there's a warrior one under strength, so only primary warrior. You can see I don't really have many because I can't put points into strength. Most of these are not very good for this character, but interesting that it has a PvP version. Sorry, getting distracted. So like right here, Warrior's Endurance, this effect is very unique for Warrior in that it gives them a lot of potential energy. The skill I'm looking for here specifically is Primal Rage. This is a skill that combines movement and attack. Actually, there's a dervish version that I tend to like a bit better called Onslaught, which also improves movement and attack speed and adrenaline gain. So this combines functionalities because normally in order to be able to get faster attack rate and faster move speed, I guess the PvP version doesn't include move speed, but in PvE it includes move speed. So normally to get both of those functionalities, you would have to bring two separate skills. And so you can get that sort of effect. You can also just get unique effects, like the Warrior's Endurance. You can get stronger versions of existing skills. So a really good example for that, let me just throw into Axe Mastery because it'll demonstrate better, is... so right here, here's Executioner Strike. Just a simple baseline skill, does a bunch of additional damage. Then there's Eviscerate, which is fairly similar to it. It does some additional damage, but it inflicts a nasty status condition called a Deep Wound. Then there's also Decapitate, which is fairly similar to Executioner Strike again. So you can get some versions that are like stronger versions. Or like right here, Cleave is kind of like a weaker Executioner Strike, but it costs less adrenaline to use. So elite skills, can fill different sort of functionality. Actually, right here, Triple Chop is very similar to Cyclone Axe, right? This does additional damage and hits all adjacent foes, and this likewise does additional damage and hits all adjacent foes. They're not always strictly better. For example, this has a 10-second recharge, and this has a 4-second recharge. You can use Cyclone Axe twice in the time you can use Triple Chop, but you can bring both of them. So elite skills are often an important part of your build, but they don't have to be. They can be something that augments or complements. And I kind of like that functionality. They're kind of like a rare card Magic the Gathering. So a lot of what I really like about this system is that there's a lot of flexibility in terms of what you can do, but there's a lot of restrictions. You can't do everything at once, but there's also a lot of room to creativity, to explore and to experiment. And the ability to experiment with what you're doing, with what your character's doing, is something that I really love. The incentives for character progression of getting new skills is something that I really like as well. So levels generally just give you all they give you is attribute points and more maximum health. That is what levels give you. And getting more attribute points allows you to do more. Now, like their weapons, for example, have requirements for attributes. So, for example, the sword that I'm currently wielding requires 9 swordsmanship to get its damage out of. Now, you can still use it without the swordsmanship, but its damage is going to be really bad. So that's kind of like how some of that works. And they have that built into the system. So you could do theoretically, you could use this system in another sort of game. What immediately comes to mind is like a Dark Souls game, where each level gets you, or like say each bonfire you light gets you some amount of attribute points, and then say you need to put, I don't know, some amount into one of your attribute lines and some amount in another to get maximum use out of a weapon or something. But this allows for a lot of room to experiment because you can change builds out of combat. You can test things out. I mean, again, in neutral zones, but you can test stuff out. But there's a certain amount of commitment. Character progression being focused almost entirely on skills is really compelling to me for a couple of reasons. The first is that skills have a definite impact on how your character plays. A lot of games, when you get levels, you're getting stat points. And stat points may have a big impact, but they also might be meaningless. And so there's some stuff there where I just don't feel like it's that engaging necessarily. Also, the skills, because of the way that they work, can send you off towards specific content. Like if you're going after a particular elite skill, you have to hunt down that specific boss. And so that also requires you to go to do specific content rather than grinding the same thing over and over again for experience points. Another really useful benefit to focusing character progression on skills rather than on stats is that it allows more of the content to be specifically crafted in terms of difficulty. And what I mean by that is, if you look at the map zones in Guild Wars, you can see from the first game that they didn't quite have the idea of how the progression worked. Because this area is aimed at about level 7 to 10. This is about like 10 to 14, 14, like 14, 15, 15, 16, kind of getting up to, by the time you're getting over here, to 17 to 19. And then like starting here, it's like level 20 here and here. But when you look at there's the expansion on this map, which is like here, here, and here. That's all level 20 stuff. For level 20, so the expansion is all for level 20, which is max level in this game. But when you come over here to Kinding Center, right, this is the next game that they made. What they did is, down here, this island right here, is for leveling up to 20, and this entire area over here is for level 20s. And when you get over to Ilona, the same sort of thing. This island here is for leveling up to 20, and this entire area over here, as well as in here, which is a little harder to see because they don't have the map the same way, but all of this is for level 20 characters. And so what they're able to do is they're able to make a lot more of the content something that you go back to even at max level and still have it potentially be at least somewhat challenging, or at least that's something that they can do, because level 20 is the maximum level, and more skills doesn't necessarily make you more powerful, it makes you more versatile. Now, there is some power associated with it, but really there's a certain power cap that the players are going to get to, and they're not really going to be able to get beyond that very well based upon getting more skills, which means that the content more broadly can be more uniform in terms of its challenge. And when I say more uniform, what I'm saying is if you go back to an area, it doesn't automatically become completely non-threatening. And so it's just something that I think is really nice about having the focus not be on getting a bunch of stat points, but on what skills do you have available to you, what flexibility, what versatility do you have, what options do you have. So, and just to kind of, again, kind of put a cap on it, one of the things that I really like about this system is that it forces you to make choices. It forces you to say, what is my build trying to do? how am I going to accomplish it? Now, you definitely don't need as many skills as this game has. It probably has more skills than it really needs. But I can say, okay, if I want to run swordsmanship, if I want to use a sword, that has a specific set of things going on with it, right? I want to put as many attribute points in it as I can in order to get as much damage out of a sword as I can get. So you can see that it increases the damage I do with my swords, and it improves the chance to inflict critical hits when using a swords. So, I need to put a certain amount into swordsmanship. But what other things am I going to do, right? How am I going to augment using my swordsmanship? Because I'm not going to want to use all sword skills. Am I going to want to use something like Onslaught in order to provide additional functionality with my swords where I'm attacking? And then if I'm going for that, well, what other things can I bring? Because I can now start bringing, say, Mystic Twister. So maybe I want to go into Wind Prayers. But if I'm using Onslaught, that might get a little expensive to maintain. So, I might want to put into Mysticism. And that gets me access to another swath of skills. So maybe I want to bring Aura Slicer. Right? This has a couple of benefits. It's strictly better than Sever Artery. It works with any weapon because it's a melee attack. It works with any melee weapon. So I might want to use that instead of something like Sever Artery. It inflicts bleeding for less duration, but also inflicts cracked armor, which reduces armor of more highly armored foes. So then, Gash is a really good option to go with that off of the sword itself. And Mystic Twister is nice to have. And so I can begin to say, okay, how am I putting all of this together? I can begin to piece things together. Maybe I want to do it like that because I know that I can run my mysticism hat because I don't need any Scythe Mastery because I'm using a sword. And so I can just begin to put stuff together. Maybe I want to use Banishing Strike and not focus as much on specific sword attacks. Maybe I want to bring Test of Faith because I think it's really useful. And so you can kind of see how you put stuff together. These are PvE only skills. Ignore them for now. Whirlwind Attack is actually really, really good. So maybe I want to bring that. And you can see that I've put together a specific sort of bar with a specific set of skills. And there's this whole process then involved in kind of figuring out what I want. Maybe I want some more durability, or maybe I want this particular skill. In fact, a skill, depending upon the area that I might want, and this is one of the things that's really cool, is maybe I want this skill right here that allows me to be able to heal myself, and if I remove Onslaught when I use it, I get rid of some hexes, which are negative things on me. And so we can see that I've been able to come up with some sort of build based upon, what things I'm wanting my character to do, and what sort of stuff I'm going to be encountering. Maybe I'd rather have Intimidating Aura to make me more durable. Maybe I'd rather use Mystic Vigor, which will allow me to gain additional health when I attack, which would also make me more durable in a different way. So there's just a lot of different things that you can do, and at the same time, there's a lot of restrictions on what you can do. Like, if I'm doing this, then I'm not really able to, say, go into tactics and say, oh, I want to use Riposte, because it's just not going to be very strong. Like, I could use it. It works with a sword and has some specific benefits, but at that point, it's diluting my bar because it's a weaker skill because I'm not speccing into it, right? I don't have any attribute points into it. So, anyway, I've probably talked way longer than is truly necessary on this, but I just really love this system because there's so many interplay. There's so much interplay. There's so many different things that you can do. And from a team building standpoint, I think the system could work really, really well with like a tactics game or something, where you can have ranges and your healers, and you can have stuff timed out, and you can have, your interrupts work and different things like that. I just think that there could be a lot of really cool systems that you could build with the same sort of skill idea. And even like I said in Souls-like, I can see where you put your heavy attack, you have stuff assigned to that, or just different ways of setting stuff up with assigning skills to weapons and equipment and stuff. And I just think it could be really, really cool. And I want these sorts of ideas, this sort of creative but restrictive system that allows you to be able to customize a great deal, but also you can't just do everything. Because this is something that happens to me, and Dark Souls is an excellent example of this, where at a certain point you kind of have access to everything at more or less is the maximum strength, and that reduces options kind of what your strongest choice is, because there's always going to be something that can become a strongest choice. And this system, one of the things that's great about it is it allows you to have areas where you need to prepare for them by saying, this is what I'm going to encounter here. And so I need to make my bar work this way. I need to put together this particular combination of how everything's going to work, because that's what's going to be able to address this area. So anyway, I really love this system. I love the sort of restrictions and creativity aspects of it. And I love the way that it gets my mental processes flowing about what sort of build can I make, what could be fun to do, how do I want to experience the game right now, and it gives me a lot of options that way. So anyway, I think if I talk anymore, I'm just going to be talking in circles. So if you have any questions about the system or anything like that, hopefully I've explained stuff well enough. There's a lot to it, and thank you for listening. Until next time, everyone, take care. Bye-bye.